You want to raise your hand right now and see if it works, or?
Good morning. This is Becky Doyle, one of the clerks, and you can test it now, and I can. There you go. Do you see it on your screen now? A little blue icon.
Now I do. Panelists. I see panelist 1. Is that? Oh, I do see it now. Okay.
There you go. And I will go ahead and lower it.
Oh, I can lower it too. So then I also wanted to do the chat. Do you use chat?
We do not.
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll just use that raising hands. Thank you very much for checking that out. I finally found it. Thank you.
Cindy's pretty good at picking you out when you're making a lot of visual.
Yes, that's what I was doing. And I appreciated that too.
And we are now live on the web.
Okay. They're a little early on the web.
Good morning, Member Reed. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Assistant County Counsel Tony Lopresti. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
A mic check. I am doing 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1.
Thanks so much, loud and clear. Good morning, Vice Mayor Bob Nunes. Would you like to do a quick mic check? You are muted.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. You might want to adjust.
Can you hear me?
We can. You might want to adjust your screen down just a little
Okay.
bit. Good morning, Chairperson Cindy Chavez. Would you like
Hi
to do
there.
a quick mic check?
Yes, I'm here.
And I will make you a co-host.
Thanks a bunch.
Good morning, Council. Lost the name. Good morning, Vice Chairperson Ellenberg. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Good morning.
Thank you. Loud and clear.
Thanks, Peggy.
Good morning.
Hey, Yvonne. How are you?
Good. Just dashing to get the little settled for a second. So I'll be right.
Apologies. Good morning, Member Jordan. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can loud and clear. Thank you. And
Thank
good
you.
morning, Mayor Pro Tem Yvonne Martinez Beltran. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Sure. Good morning, everybody.
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, Member Shaw. Would you like to do a quick mic?
Hello, good morning.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Good
think
morning, Roz. Can we get a quick mic check?
Supervisor Chavez,
Yes.
I know it's probably too late, but I know that Palo Alto did not submit an application, and I have been told that there is interest if you would still like them to join the effort. But it may be too late since the board has approved the members.
You know, I don't think, I mean, to be honest with you, we really wanted all the cities to participate. And what we did with the city seats is we gave them to cities that had more than one person interested for the cities who didn't sign up. But the idea really was to get as many cities participating as possible. So I'm going to ask Scott to work with Tony LaPresti on council, and I'll have a conversation with my co-chair, vice chair, Susan. I'm reading the title, which is why, but I think it would be great to have more cities.
I certainly think we should try to bring them in.
Yeah. So we'll work on that. And in fact, if we can do a referral for our next board meeting, since we have time.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Andy. I appreciate you continuing to beat the bushes there.
And in the meantime, before they're officially approved by the board, they should certainly, be able to join and be present and weigh in and just not officially vote until we get that approved, if that's what we need.
Yeah, and Andy, I'll talk to you a little bit more about the process, because what would be great is if they only had one, or they make their own choice about who they want, would be helpful. In some areas, we had multiple people ask, so that's how we ended up with so many, which is fine. I mean, the more the merrier.
I would guess, but I think it's Councilmember Niss.
Oh, great. Good. I know we have a few people coming over from another meeting, so I apologize that we're gonna have a couple people late because they're finishing up in another area. And perhaps if we could have the clerk, if there are other mics you want to do mic check for.
Thank you. Good morning, Council Member Esparza. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Hi, I'm here.
Thank you. Good morning, Council Member Ramirez. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
I'm here.
Thank you. Good morning, Hillary. Would you like to do a quick mic check?
Hi, Peggy. Thank you.
Thanks. And good morning, Mayor Constantine. Can I get a quick mic check?
Good morning. I'm assuming you heard me.
I did. I'm so sorry. I was looking for the next name I missed. Loud and clear. Thanks so much.
Good morning, and just a quick reminder that we are live on the web.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to ask if you could unmute yourselves so the clerk may call roll.
Member Jordan?
Present.
Member Haraz?
Present.
Council Member Bybee? Council Member Ann Bybee? Mayor Stephen Scharf? Mayor Stephen Scharf? Council Member Bracco?
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Martinez Beltran?
Here.
Thank you. Council Member Sinks?
chair over here.
Councilmember Rod Sinks. Councilmember Dominguez. Councilmember Rod Dominguez.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Nunez.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Lawler.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Constantine.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Ramirez.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Perales. Councilmember Raúl Perales. Councilmember Esparza.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Klein. Mayor Larry Klein. Member Clark.
Here.
Thank you. Member Reeve.
Here.
Thank you. Member Atari.
Here.
Member Baines. Member Kelsey Baines. Member Franklin.
Here.
Thank you. Member Sharp. Member Samina Sharp. Member Stepanov.
Here.
Thank you. Member Cooper. Member Crystal Cooper. Member Pham. Member Dr. Randall Pham. Member King. Member Anthony Tyrone King. Member Shaw.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chairperson Ellenberg.
I'm here.
Chairperson Chavez.
Here. Andy?
I just received a message from Stephen Scharf saying that he's on the call, but they haven't let him in.
Huh.
He's on the call by phone, but they never sent a participant code. So a lot of people may not be able to call in, he said.
And this is
What are
Rod
the
Sinks.
last three digits of his phone number?
Andy, could you ask him, what are the last digits of his phone number? Then Nancy can try to let him in.
Okay, hold on.
And while
This
you're
is
doing
Rod
that,
Sinks. I'm also here.
yeah, I was just going to say Rod Sinks joined
Great,
us.
thank you.
Councilmember Perales has joined us, and Mayor Lawler has joined us.
Hold on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is Councilmember Perales. Appreciate that.
Thanks. I don't know if anybody else, did anybody else not get called while we're looking for that phone number? Oh, Kelsey and Baines has also joined us. Thanks, Kelsey. Anybody else? No. All right. So Andy, you want to?
I'm looking, I'm trying to see what his digits are. Rod, do you know the last, it's not showing me what his phone number is. Oh, 7910, the last four.
This is
I don't see that number.
7910 is what I have for his mobile phone.
Yeah, that's what I have too. He said he can just listen.
I have to say, just really quickly, when I tried to sign on at first, I also was only a attendee. And so I had to go back to the most recent email that was sent this morning and click on that link to get into the meeting.
Yeah, there's one sent at 9:57 that I got that worked.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Thank you.
Okay, can you give me the name of the person who is waiting for a link and we can resend that to him?
Stephen Scharf, Mayor
Okay,
Scharf.
we'll,
from
we'll,
Cupertino.
we'll send that out.
Great. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
No, thanks for catching that. And I'm glad Mayor Sharp's joining us. So, you know, we live in a technical world now. All right. So with that, now that we have everybody called in, let me just describe the agenda today for you. We have two big items under item 2, and we're going to get 2 reports. One is what's happening right now, the investments that have been able to be made during COVID-19. We're going to have the staff present that, open it up for question and comments. And then the second is a more in-depth look at specific solutions in some of your cities. And after that, we'll also be able to weigh in, give feedback, and ask questions. And then what we'll do is we'll take public comment for item 2. In fact, we'll take public comment for item 2 after we've had the first presentation, but before we have the second. That way folks don't have to wait so long, but that we can at least get the conversation started. And then item 3 is public comment that is relative to anything within the purview of this committee, but not necessarily on today's agenda. So our goal today is, I think we have a couple of hours for the meeting, so folks feel free to ask as many questions as they like. We try to create enough flexibility for folks to be able to do that today. So is that all right with everybody? Everybody got the agenda okay? Okay, good. Then I'm gonna turn it over. Hillary, am I starting with you?
Yes, Supervisor, thank you.
Great, thank you.
And I will share my screen. So we also have with us today Catherine Kaminsky, the Acting Deputy Director for the Office of Supportive Housing, and she is also leading our Joint Department Operations Center work, and so she's probably our resident COVID housing expert and can answer questions. And then more focused on the second part of the agenda, Chad Bojorquez with Destination Home, who is one of the leads for Strategy 3 of the Community Plan to End Homelessness. So first, we'll talk about the additions that we have made to the supportive housing system since the start of COVID. So this chart shows by the number of households that can be served per night, the capacity that we had in our sheltering system. And I've broken out that first section by the year-round capacity and then the seasonal capacity. So we operate a number of shelters in the cold weather season with a focus on adding to the temporary capacity to allow people in and out of the cold. And then also have shown the reductions. So at the start of COVID, we had 1,043 household beds or household units in our system, and a household is either a family with children or a couple or a single individual. So we consider all those to be households. And so we had space for 1,043 households at the start of COVID, and we had 278 seasonal beds, and they were open at the time that COVID started. Because of the need for social distancing and to allow sufficient space in facilities, we had to reduce that shelter capacity by 309 in our year-round beds and 122 in our seasonal beds. And those reductions happened mostly or I think fully in our congregate shelters. hearing that I'm a little fuzzy, so I'm going to switch. I'm going to see if I can switch my audio. And so just give me. Catherine Minsky, do you mind taking over and explaining the additions to the system while I fix my audio?
Sure. Your audio did sound fine to me, but so hopefully it's not everybody. Yeah, so I think as Hillary mentioned, we had to decrease congregate shelter in sites where folks, are in bunk beds. They couldn't stay in bunk beds anymore, move beds separate at least 10 to 12 feet apart. So that immediate reduction was seen in March, but at the same time, we were able to add 4 congregate shelter sites. The city of San Jose added, as Reagan mentioned the other night, I believe, 3 sites in the spring. One of those is still open at South Hall, which has a capacity of 285. The county also opened the Gateway Shelter at the fairgrounds. So we were able to replace a lot of the lost capacity. We also added a lot of non-congregate shelter. So that is our motels and hotels. The county stood up 12 different sites. That's 780 rooms available. 10 of those sites are for vulnerable homeless individuals who have are vulnerable to specifically vulnerable to COVID based on their age or multiple underlying conditions. That's sort of defined by FEMA and the CDC, those underlying conditions that make them vulnerable. And then 2 of the hotels are for people who require isolation because they are COVID positive or have been exposed. And those are both for folks experiencing homelessness and people who are unable to isolate at home because they live in overcrowded situations. So it's right as of today, it's about 50-50 that we have served in those 2 sites, homeless versus folks that are housed and can't isolate at home. So in total, as you see on the screen, we have a net add of 512 and some more planned and on the way, which are a lot of the San Jose emergency interim housing, excuse me. And I think that summarizes the changes since March.
Thanks, KJ. And I think that one of the things that we wanted to highlight as well is that all of this was stood up very quickly and is being funded with emergency funds. And so if we as a community cannot find a way to reinvest in these solutions when the pandemic is over and emergency funds go away, we will see a reduction in our shelter capacity. In particular, on these sites added since March, the congregate shelters were added at the fairgrounds and the City of San Jose's Convention Center and the community center. And so when those facilities can have their regular use back, they may not be available. And then with the hotels and the motels, when business travel and tourism are back up to regular levels, there may be a risk of not having available rooms in the hotels and motels. And also the rates are likely to increase back to pre-COVID rates. We're getting some pretty excellent hotel rates now that the hotels can't have regular travel. And so as we think about what the shelter capacity will be when we're through pandemic, the numbers could reduce back to levels if we can't find a way to maintain them. The slide deck that was posted did have an additional slide but after I had borrowed that from a separate deck, and it turns out that that data was not up to date. So I've taken it out for the purposes of the meeting. So that's the last slide on COVID supervision.
Thank you. Do folks have comments or questions about what's been presented? If you do, please feel free to raise your blue hand. Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you, Chair. Do you have information about the populations served for each of these types, or based on number of beds? What I've seen is we tend to focus on certain populations and not so much on others, and that may sort of skew the impact of the the beds that we've made available. Do you have that information, or is that something you could provide to the task force?
Catherine, you might be able to best answer that.
Yeah, I think we could provide that to the task force. In terms of when you say population served, do you mean like demographics, age, things like that?
I mean more, so I think about, we have preferences in Mountain View, priority for families with children served by school districts serving the city. And then I think seniors, the disabled, that kind of thing. So do cities that are setting up, or the county, do they have preferences like that, or is it open to anybody?
Most of our shelters are shelters that existed pre-COVID are open to anybody, but some of them are set up specifically to serve families, like you said, and we can provide that information, sort of a snapshot of who's being served today, or sort of who's been served over a period of time. Specifically the shelters that were set up, the non-congregate, the motels and hotels that were set up in response to COVID, those have an eligibility criteria that's set by FEMA and based on the CDC guidelines. So that's, folks over the age of 65 and folks that have specific underlying conditions that make them vulnerable. So that population that was served in the hotels, motels, it does look kind of specific based on those guidelines, but we can also provide that sort of household type, families with children, individual adults, age, gender, that kind of information. We can pull that together for a future meeting or to share with the task force.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Member Reeve?
Hi, I just wanted to know, after COVID, after you clear from it, what's going to happen to the people that's in some of the shelters? Have you guys made plans for that?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Yes, we are. So at this point, for the folks that are in the motels and hotels, because we know we won't be keeping those open forever, we're working with them to move them to the City of San Jose's emergency interim housing. If they are affiliated with San Jose, they spend time in San Jose, or their last residence was in San Jose. And we're also working on, a lot of the folks there are being referred to our housing programs, our permanent supportive housing programs, or our rapid rehousing programs through, through our coordinated entry system process. So at this point, we are not planning to shut down any shelter and without an alternate option for them available.
Thank you. I'm going to go to member Lisa Reeve. Lisa? You're on mute.
I got it.
There you go.
Thank you. I had a question if there were any discussions had by any entities about purchasing any of these hotels that are being used now for the COVID, if there's any discussion at all about purchasing any of them. I do recall our governor talking at one point about cities maybe being purchasing hotels that they can later use post-COVID. And I just was wondering if there has been any discussion on that by anybody.
Yes, thank you. Hillary?
Yes, there has. We are certainly looking into it and have, I believe, so I think that the governor's program that you're talking about is Project Home Key. And within Santa Clara County, we have 3 home key projects that have been approved for funding to date. I believe that one is in the city of San Jose, one in Milpitas, and one in Mountain View, and at least one of those involves the purchase of a motel. So we are looking into it for sure, and pursuing any option that we feel like we could execute.
Okay, but nothing's been put in place as of yet.
Actually, we have had some purchases. Consuelo, do you know the answer to that? Because I feel like I just
Yes.
voted on something.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor. So we are moving forward with the acquisition in conjunction with Jamboree Housing for an extended stay America in the city of Milpitas. It's a currently 146 unit motel that will be used on an interim basis for about 12 months, and then will be converted into permanent housing that will include some modifications. So the reduced number, or the ultimate permanent number, would be 134 units. 2 of those will be for managers. In the city of San Jose, they are also acquiring a 76 unit motel that we, the county, are currently using for one of our isolation programs that Catherine mentioned. And we're working with the city now to make sure that there's a transition plan for the households that are currently staying at that motel, to make sure that there's no disruption. The third site in Mountain View is the construction of a new shelter. It's not the conversion of a motel. So those are the 2 acquisitions that we are, one, directly involved with. The San Jose site is more peripherally. We're still working with the city to determine what the county's contribution, if anything, will be.
Okay, and are these...
And the home key programs are moving quickly. There's a requirement with home key that the project starts within a certain, I think it's within 90 days of acquisition.
Thank you.
Okay, and there's no restrictions. This is post-COVID?
So it's meant for both.
Correct.
If you at the program guidelines, it allows for in continued use during COVID, but it's intended to provide permanent use, either as interim housing or permanent supportive housing.
Good, that's great news, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to go to Antonina.
Thank you. On your slide here, you show what's available at each of these types of housing, but do you have capacity, meaning how much was used up each month? If they were available, were they all at 100%, or how much is being used?
I don't have that data off the top of my head here, but we do maintain that and can provide that at the next meeting. I do know that we are rarely at 100%, and that's partly due to turnover, partly due to finding people who want to use congregate shelters and things like that. So we can do a presentation on vacancy rates at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. I had a question on page 4 where it, on item F, where it mentions temporary shelter for homeless men, women, families with minimal needs. And then also just the family aspect of it. In San Jose, we converted from safe parking for families, particularly with small children, to a motel voucher program. Is that captured in the motel numbers? And are any other cities doing, what are the strategies that other cities are taking with homeless families? Are they also doing the motel vouchers?
So with regard to the motel voucher program, it is included in the capacity, and the augmentation to add to the motel voucher program is included here. The page 4 that you're referencing is the slide where we had some data errors, and so we need to update that data for you all. With regard to what other cities are doing in terms of sheltering, there is some information on the additional attachment. There aren't a lot of family shelters outside the city of San Jose. There's shelter in Sunnyvale that serves families. There's a shelter in Mountain View that serves families, and a shelter in Gilroy that serves families. But the county does have a hotel program that we operate to serve families from any part of the city. We have been able to take advantage of the COVID hotel rates, and so we have a block of rooms at a hotel in the city of San Jose for that purpose. And so families from any other city could utilize that program to stay there.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I brought that up. I know that the family shelter in San Jose is booked. It's incredibly difficult to get into, and we had experimented with safe parking with families, and the reality is, I don't believe we ever had more than 13 people in that, because families just didn't want to sit in a car all night, but they did want connection to services, and it was just hard to get to the one location in San Jose that we offered that. So the motel vouchers were much more effective, and so I was just wondering if there was a standard sort of process in different cities in the county around that, what some of the experience of other cities were. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony King? Anthony? Oh, there you go.
I had two questions. One was about Gilroy capacity. I heard you just touch on it before about the family shelter, but is there anything else being done in Gilroy? And two, is there any plan to expand family shelters? Like Councilmember Esparza said, they're usually full, even outside of the pandemic, year round. And it's usually families are hard to get it in there. And then when we look at the race and equity study, it shows a lot of Latinx families that have a disproportionate amount of homelessness in a certain age range. So, I mean, I was just wondering if there's any plan for Office of Supportive Housing to look to expand here in the county seat, the family housing program. I mean, the family shelter program.
Yes, certainly we look at families as we look at expanding any shelter. There is family shelter in Gilroy. We operate seasonally the Ochoa Migrant Farm Worker Center as a seasonal shelter for families. And also at the seasonal Gilroy Armory Shelter, we have space for families. And then the county is currently working on implementing a shelter for families at the Civic Center using tiny homes, micro houses.
Anthony, was that your only question?
Yes, thank you. Well, she answered both of them.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Dominguez?
Good morning, Chair. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for the information. It's definitely very valuable, especially in the city of Milpitas. As many of us on this call have experienced in the past, when projects move through our cities, we are faced with challenges that come from our neighborhood community members. And so as we all work through this in a collaborative spirit, I want to be very frank and honest in terms of where I see this moving really fast, and I understand the need and I support that because we must all join forces to help our vulnerable families. But I also believe that the process of conversations with neighborhoods that are already in existence of where those projects are going to be placed in is very important. And so as I look and hear everyone speak of how we must come together to think differently, to evolve, definitely the report does show that there is a gap in families, and it's something that I experience daily as I work with our unhoused community in my role and hat as a crime prevention specialist with the San Jose Police Department. And it's something that I'm sure all of us have experienced. So my question comes to staff in terms of, are we going to be implementing the models that we currently have for the programs for it's Project Room? I always call it Project Room Key, but with the new project that's coming from the state. Or is this an opportunity for us to come up with an exemplary model program, which I am hearing families are not being served? And I do feel that even in our respective communities, at least here in Milpitas, it's been pretty loud that people want to help our unhoused community and that we want to help break those stereotypes, but that they're really just feeling the lack of, it's kind of like the push mentality, right? This project is being pushed. But I kind of feel if we work together, and this is just not in our city, I think it's in probably everybody's city, that if we work together to form that model program, then we would be able to advocate more for these programs to come into our cities. And so I'm just wondering, one, my question is the model program for the hotel acquisitions that are happening already in place? Or is that something that the county is working with the cities to come up with?
Hillary, do you want to respond to that? And council member, can I ask just a clarifying question? Are you asking whether or not the program itself is already defined countywide, like the way the service model works, or are you asking about the outreach model?
I'm asking in the implementation model. And I'm a little familiar with the outreach model. We got a little bit of information about the community meetings, but this just sounds like it's moving. It sounds like we have to implement 90 days from acquisition, and it sounds like the acquisition is happening already.
Got it.
So my question is, are we having those conversations now of what that model program is going to look like? And if so, I think it would be in due respect that, I mean, Vice Mayor Bonillas and myself are here. I know we both would like to be part of those conversations because honestly, I would really want to form a bridge, but it's really hard to do when I don't even know the information or I'm not part of those conversations. And I actually think that's part of this task force because all of us are going to be faced in that situation. And as a rookie member, I know many of you have more experience than me in this, but I'm already facing it. But I want to try to help uplift these programs in our community so they're welcomed. But I think because this is moving so fast, I just want to know what's the plan for that. And if there's no plan, would it be a possibility of both Vice Mayor and myself to be part of those conversations? Because I think that would just help us help the county implement that program here, at least in Milpitas.
Thank you. Hillary?
Yes, the 90-day turnaround is specific to the state-funded home key project. And so, Consuelo, could you talk a little bit about the project in Milpitas and how it relates to this?
Sure. Great question, Councilwoman. One of the things that we've been doing with your staff, and we had a presentation on Tuesday, where we talked a little bit about what a response in Milpitas might look like across a variety of programs, from shelter, outreach, homelessness prevention, rapid rehousing, and permanent housing. So I anticipate that you, the full board will see a presentation sometime in October. And what we've been doing is working directly with staff in Milpitas to come up with an outreach program specifically for the Extended Stay America in Milpitas, just so that we can meet the requirements that the state has set. Beyond that, there is an opportunity for programming. There's the Sango Court Apartments that is due to start construction later this year, hopefully if they get their tax. That includes units for families. And we have a couple of other sites in your city that we're working on with your staff to determine what is the need in your community to make sure that as projects come before us, we are considering your local need. And we heard from your city manager that families is a specific priority. We also had task on the phone look at what the number of homeless people in Milpitas and what the demographics are, household size. And so we're trying to make sure that we pair the solution with the need. So there's absolutely an opportunity for you to be part of those conversations, whether that be as we continue to work together in your subcommittee, your housing subcommittee, or directly through your council meetings.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that information. It's greatly appreciated.
And your staff, I just have to say, your staff is wonderful. We probably talk to them at least twice a week. They're really eager to try to understand how our system works and how we can collaborate and work together and leverage the small resources that we each have to help people the most. And so they're wonderful.
Thank you. I'll definitely let them know they are a small but mighty group, I tell them.
Thank you, Karina. Vice Mayor Nunez?
Yeah, so I did want to, I agree with small and mighty, but I also want to second all those things that the council member said, because the group that hasn't really participated yet is the community in talking about this kind and types of services and such. And being present at the subcommittee on Tuesday, we did get a lot of information, but still the community still hasn't had their opportunity to share their voice. And I think that's, along with the council member, I would like to make sure that the council and the community are part of the implementation development process and not just hearing about the implementation. And our staff is exceptional, but the community really wants to be heard. And I think that's really what I would encourage. And as long as those timelines are in there and those dates are in there, I think this is going to be really an exceptional program. And I just want to make sure that the community is brought along, community is brought along with us.
Yeah,
So
and thank you. Thanks, Vice Mayor. I'm just in response to that that point. We heard an item on our board meeting on Tuesday, and one of the requests that Supervisor Ellenberg raised that I concurred with is that making sure that we have a very good county process for communication when we're in the process of purchasing something, but in partnership with cities, so that we're not surprising anybody ever. And so one of the things that we've asked our staff to do is really make sure that that we have a shared protocol in terms of communication. And we recognize that the primary communicators really is it's the city council members with their constituents, but that way that we're being very consistent. And I do think it's really a good idea for us to make sure that we have the communication plans for the cities in terms of how they do communication with their own constituents, because I think that where we get in the most trouble, and I think Antonina has been bringing this up with us, is really not having meaningful conversations with the community and being consistent about the way we do that. So thanks for raising that. I'm going to go now. We're going to take another comment on this item, and then we're going to go to public comment and then go to our second item. Mayor Pro Tem, I'm not used to that title. I don't know why. Mayor Pro Tem Yvonne Martinez Beltran.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. I know we could just go with Vice Mayor, but that would be too easy. So I wanted to really ask about our goal with the task force. Is that when we're looking at community-wide, I mean, this is just fantastic because you have, all the different cities represented. But so I'm wondering, as we're looking towards our work plan, is our goal to have access for families in every community? Or we're a smaller city. And so, this is fantastic to be able to glean some expertise from some of you who have more capacity. But also, I'm trying to think, once the task force has done and we've concluded our work, are we trying to get access in every community as part of this effort for families? For example, in Gilroy, I know that we've got some access there, but we have a safe park program that we use in Morgan Hill that's been incredibly successful there. I've met with them and they're doing fantastic work in transitioning people to more permanent spaces. We also have motel and hotel voucher availability. But as far as families being able to transition out and have that stability, is that something that, we're looking to do in every community, or is that something more of a South County with your neighboring city? What is it? What is our goal that we're trying to get to? And one of the reasons that I say that is because although we work with Gilroy very closely and happy to work with, San Jose and others, as you know, transit has been cut, and that means access has been cut. And we know that when people are most successful when they have local support and those local relationships that they can rely on.
So,
That's me.
yeah, so let me just say, the goal really is to work with every city to help them help us address the homeless needs in their community. So what we're going to do, in fact, the second part of this meeting is take a look at what's happening already in cities relative to this more urgent need. And then we're going to really try to have a plan that is regional but customized to the cities that we're working with.
Okay. And then that's kind of that's really more of the second pillar. I know we're addressing the immediate and emergency.
That's right.
But from that, we've just seen so many things that we put into place with COVID that were emergency and immediate, now transition into a longer term. And so I'm wondering if we can just be mindful of that as we're working through the plan.
You guys, this committee it has a charge from the board, but the charge is we have an urgent need. How do cities writ large help address this urgent need? But we're going to learn a lot along the way, and we're going to be able to make recommendations in any number of ways. And let me just be clear, the recommendations are not just to the board. They're going to be to each of your cities, and they're going to be to other entities that could help as well. So I think we can do, walk and chew gum. Because frankly, at the first meeting, there were a lot of issues that came up that aren't directly within the purview of the committee, but they're super smart and we should act on them. So we will, right?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that. And then our last speaker on this item is Diane.
Hi, thank you. I am on the committee as a member of the public, so excuse me if these are kind of more general questions, but my background is financial, so I'm coming at this from kind of a more technical perspective, and I've read through everything. And as a novice here, my first question was, is there some sort of a snapshot somewhere where someone who has not been on these committees can understand, as an example, okay, in San Jose, there's X number of unhoused needed. The total budget is XYZ. There's been an analysis of here are some options for allocating that budget, tracking which programs are working, which aren't, a process. From my perspective, I've seen so much different information in different places, and just trying to view it in one place so I can understand how the data can be analyzed and how, from even a financial perspective, what makes sense, what's working, what's not, how many are, there's 500 helped in one program, and how does that translate going forward? Are there databases tracking this type of data? So again, I'm sorry if these are if
No,
this
these
is
are
already done, but I'm just trying to really understand it from a global perspective and before I go down into the detail. So
Yeah, Diane, those are great questions. And, frankly, the reason we did the first couple meetings the way we did is that there's such a lot of information.
yes.
And I think we've been trying to figure out how best to scaffold that information so that we can get as much of a level playing field for all of us. And by the way, all of us see this from a very unique perspective. So the reason there are so many different types of folks on the committee is we really do want to get everybody's different people's perspective and how they see the world. But to answer your question about whether or not there's an all-in-one easy, not easy, there's nothing easy about this, but the to better understand where we think we're having success, what's effective, and all of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Consuelo if she can make a recommendation. I have one, but Consuelo, I wanted to get your thoughts on if we wanted someone to get an opportunity to read one or two documents that would really help them put their arms around this, what would that be? And then let me just answer one question while Consuelo's thinking about that, is that as it relates to finances, the reality is that we have to put the money together based on what it is that we recommend and what resources we have available. And frankly, we don't know the answer to all of those questions. When we did our last task force meeting, our last task force on this was, we wanted to do something to really address homelessness. At the end of that meeting, we came up with 1,000 good ideas, and we made some very significant changes in our partnerships between the cities and the housing authority. There were some great outcomes, but ultimately at the end, we said we need money because we got to build it. Yep. And then we went out and did Measure A. And so some of this is foundational and some of this will be stuff we can act on right away. It's not going to be just a silver bullet where we come up with one idea. It's going to be a bunch of strategies that we're going to have to figure out how to put in place quickly.
So if I actually just started creating my own spreadsheet, and if you were able to get a database person who was willing to do pro bono work to organize this.
Well, we actually may have what you need. I'm going to turn that over to Consuelo. I was just responding to the first, just the process and the financing. And by the way, meeting 4 is all about money.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, it's not just I'm just trying to get my arms around maximizing what the best option is in each, because I'm looking at all the finances and correlating that with what's been successful, what's not been successful. If there are, obviously San Jose has the majority, and how is that being implemented? So
great. Consuelo, do you want to respond?
Yes, great question. The good thing about the work that we've been doing and the investment that we've made on our team is we have a lot of data to help answer your questions. So we can send you some information or send it to the entire group. Some of the recommendations off the top of my head include the State of the Supportive Housing System report from 2017, 2018. The Community Plan to End Homelessness has some data. And then we
yep, I've read through all of them.
And then we also, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the reports that we provide to our Housing, Land Use, and Transportation and Environment Committee. This shows the capacity of our system and the different programs that we administer. And if you haven't seen those, I'm happy to send a couple of links. Each time we report on something slightly different. And then we have an annual report that we produce. So that's another set of information. And I want to say that what was shared with this group included the cost study that showed permanently housing folks from a system perspective is the most cost-effective way of solving the problem. And that's purely looking at it from a financial perspective. We can also share with you, if you're interested in the cost of building housing, for instance, we do publish reports to the board that include the average cost per unit, depending on household type, unit type, and construction type.
Right. Yep. I have seen all of that. I'm just wondering if there's one place for now that has all of that data broken out. For example, like I said, by San Jose, number needed, budget, proposed allocations, a lot of the analytics would probably have to be customized if you wanted to make this kind of a quick way to understand what's working with what.
Yes, definitely. We can point you towards, and on our website, we have that type of information for the housing bond. And I don't think it's spelled out as clean as it could be, but we do have some of the other data for the programs that you're asking about. And I'm happy to send you the link and walk you through it.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Consuelo, at some point, we might just, again, want to agendize that so everybody has the same information. And then, Diane, as you're looking at all this, feel free to be very specific and also just emailing us and saying, here's what this means to me. Like, here's what I need.
And who do I email that to? Because I started spreadsheets already, and I have specific questions. And I don't want to.
You can email that to the clerk, or you can email it to Scott. And Scott will put his email in the chat for everyone. And Scott's my staff person working on this, and we'll include Hillary on all of that communication. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, we're going to go to our public comment, and I'm going to take Scott Largent. I know he's been, and we'll do 2 minutes. I know he's been on and off, so if we could take him before he's off again would be great.
Sure. So our first speaker is Scott Largent. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Largent. I'll ride things out till the minute at the end to bring up the civil issues of what the homeless community is dealing with. I brought this up 2 days ago that they don't trust you people. And once you can realize how they're being dumped through the civil channel, it's not the criminal courts that they're being ran through. It's our traffic courts. They're running them through on citations. They found a way to rig it. And our first line of defense at the public defender's office is just looking the other way. I bring this up. Cindy, I just don't think you want to hear it, but I'm hoping, since you are an attorney, Susan, that you're starting to kind of hear my cries of what's really going on. That homeless woman, Sumi Rose, that lives on the side of City Hall, she got railroaded. Okay, she was in custody. She wasn't taken to her court appearances. It started to stack charges of contempt against that woman. Okay, the mental health system is doing nothing to help her, house her, or even get her off of the side of City Hall right now. Our system failed that woman. We basically booted her out of Campbell. We booted her out of San Jose. It's just so sad. The woman lives on the side of your building there, Cindy. Maybe go talk to her. I don't understand why this doesn't work. There's thousands of these people. And so you all understand, I'm speaking for these people at this meeting. And that's the same thing that Robert Aguirre is doing. We're speaking for thousands of people that are on the streets in Santa Clara County right now. And 1 minute at the end of the meeting is absolutely shameful. It's a violation of California law. And I am going to file a complaint against you, Chavez. I think this is just shameful right now. And you're taking too much on. Okay, dish this committee off to somebody else. We need true leadership right now. Go get him, Susan Ellenberger. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you're going to do the right thing.
Thank you, Scott. So we're going to go now to the second part of item 2. And Consuelo, are you presenting on that, or is that Hillary?
Hillary.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Consuelo and Supervisor Chavez. So we wanted to share some information about what the cities are already doing to address homelessness in terms of emergency needs in their community. And so we've given you this information in 2 ways today. One is in the slide deck, we'll go through some highlights, and then you have an accompanying chart that shows information that was provided by the cities. We do still have a few cities that we're waiting to hear from, and so as we get that information, we will continue to populate that and send updates with the meeting agendas. So as we look at the city responses, I wanted to note a few things. One is that many cities are also focusing efforts on permanent interventions, and that information was not included in this presentation or in the table that accompanies, since that isn't the focus of this task force. The second thing is that the information included provides data on where the city is providing funding for programs, services, or activities, or has assumed a leadership role. There are other activities happening in cities that are funded by the county or by CBOs and private funding sources that may not be included in the table. And I mentioned the last thing already. So let's go through some highlights, and then we wanted to leave plenty of time for discussion. So there are several cities that are implementing safe parking. They're not all included here, but I wanted to provide some examples of interesting ways that people are doing that. So in Mountain View, the city of Mountain View has provided a significant amount of funding to be able to expand case management services provided at the safe parking lots in the city of Mountain View. There are about 80 safe parking spots. Two of the safe parking sites are on city-owned land. They also have a site at two sites at a church, and one site that is at that will in the future be an affordable housing development. But until the developer starts construction, it's being used as a safe parking site, and that was done. That was initiated and made possible by the city. And then the city of Mountain View is also doing the lot improvement work that's necessary to make it a safe parking lot, like striping and such. Mountain View and Palo Alto have safe parking city ordinances. The city of Campbell has what they call the camping ordinance. So it deals with any outdoor sleeping, whether in vehicles or not. So it encompasses safe parking. And then the city of Morgan Hill works very closely with a faith community to provide a safe parking lot, and they provide some funding for case management of that lot. There are also many cities provide funding for drop-in services, whether it's at a drop-in center designated for people who are unhoused, or at a community services agency like West Valley Community Services, Sunnyvale Community Services, St. Joseph's Family Center. And so Cupertino, Sunnyvale, Gilroy, and Montecito all do that, where they provide funding to their local community services agencies. And this is not to say that others don't. I wanted to make sure to highlight something for every city that's provided information. So the cities of Milpitas, Mountain View, and Morgan Hill all have interesting ways that they're contributing to outreach to people who are unhoused. In Morgan Hill, they provide funding for a county to the county to support a community-wide outreach team that we contract the work to a CBO, and their contribution allows dedicated hours in that city, where the rest of the time the outreach team is county-wide responsive. And then the cities of Milpitas and Mountain View both have close partnerships. They have dedicated work within their police department to unhoused outreach, whether it be the HOT team in Milpitas that works closely with their CBOs, or in Mountain View, the police department has a designated officer as part of their neighborhood event services team. And he and the other outreach officers distribute resources and information and participate in coordination calls and meetings with their CBOs. And then sheltering is obviously important and a focus. The city of San Jose has done a great job using city lands and their shelter crisis declarations and state laws that allow this to establish unconventional temporary housing sites. They have been really creative in using tiny homes on wheels and modular structures as well as setting up congregate shelters in the city convention center and in departments controlled by their Parks and Rec department. And then Mountain View has worked with a local CBO to secure home key funding to develop a new shelter using modulars that will be open in early 2021. So that's the highlight of what some cities are doing. We also have some slides in the deck related to strategy 3. I don't intend to go through these in great detail, but they do provide, we've been showing you for the last 2 meetings, the sub-strategies in the community plan strategy 3, and this takes it to an even deeper level. And as you think about what the opportunities are to implement programming in the community plan has offered some guidance on what could happen, including things like serving families. So here on this slide, 1D talks about ensuring that all families have access to shelter. And if we have specific questions about this portion, which is the strategy 3 of the community plan, Chad Bujarquez is here to answer those as well.
Great. Do you, Chad, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not specifically, but thank you. Very open to hearing what this group has to say about strategy 3, because both Reagan Henninger and I, who are co-chairing the community plan implementation, really want to use this Unhoused task force as like our starting point. So the recommendations that hopefully come out of this group, I think we are really interested to see where those go. And I heard, I believe it was Councilmember Mayor Bob Nunes earlier was saying that, you know, you want to be part of the strategy making and the thinking behind what gets implemented. So just know that I'm listening and we're listening to make sure that your viewpoint is incorporated. And we actually hope that we can kind of continue to have some kind of recurring gathering that involves all of the cities, because that's been kind of like a gap in the way that we've been able to have ongoing relationship building, especially around these interim solutions. Kind of modeling what we've done so far with the permanent housing and the Measure A implementation, which has been awesome, and we have like really great information sharing. We'd love to try to get to that point with the interim solutions as well. So thanks for the opportunity to share.
Thanks, Chad. So we'll now go to comments and questions if folks have them, and we'll start with Jerome.
Sorry, I was having problems with my mute. Quick off-topic thing. I wanted to commend the Board of Supervisors on making Juneteenth a paid holiday going forward. I think that's a really good step in the right direction. Back on topic. So, you know, I listen to Scott Largent, and I'm not as abrasive as he is sometimes, but I completely agree with what he says a lot of the time. I don't think the homeless community has very much trust in like the cities and the counties. You know, because I know here at the Sunnyvale shelter, the collaborative before I was part of it, you know, worked on getting like a heat wave policy put in place, you know, for any time it's like over 87 degrees in the county, that the county would open like cooling centers and things like that, so people can get out of the heat. You know, for COVID, you know, it didn't happen over the summer when we had heat waves, and now we have another heat wave coming up like the next week for like 5 days. And I'm just wondering, like, are there going to be cooling centers for individuals? You know, and I think maybe people misunderstood me when I talked last meeting about sanctioned encampments. I would call them like humanitarian zones, you know, just basic necessities that individuals need to like survive and maintain, you know, hygiene and kind of some sort of order. You know, and that's like a step in the direction of getting people, the majority of the people who are homeless or out in encampments and on the streets, kind of getting them back into like a routine of being a regular member of society per se. You know, and I kind of feel like, you know, I've heard, I have not verified anything about the troubling way that the census is being done to homeless people, especially in encampments, when it comes to counting those individuals this year. You know, I don't believe the homeless individuals are being approached and counted individually. I think the census is actually just not approaching motorhomes or tents and just counting each tent or each motorhome as like one individual person, and then just kind of moving on, you know, from there. You know, and that I think is going to do like a gross undercounting of the homeless population that are out on the streets right now. And I see like these numbers for like increased capacity or, you know, number of shelter beds and things like that. But, you know, we're in the time of COVID, and I think there's like an expectation that there's going to be more people who lose their housing once, you know, all these moratoriums and that are protecting people from getting kicked out of where they're living right now. And just the estimated increase of homelessness in general, just as the population increases in this area, you know, I'm wondering if these numbers are reflecting what people are expecting to come in the future. I haven't seen any estimated numbers of the increase of homelessness in Santa Clara County, you know, for like the next 10 years. Like, where's that growth chart? You know, and so, yeah, I appreciate everything that's being done, but I think it's like always, it seems like we're always like a step behind when it comes to things like that.
Thank you, Jerome. I want to ask if anybody, any of our staff could talk about the issues that Jerome just raised. And the first one was around heat waves and cooling centers. Does anybody on the phone know much about what we're doing in that area? Not just us. I know this is something that the cities are dealing with primarily, but any...
Yes. So we do have cooling centers that will be opening starting tomorrow for the coming heat wave. We were impacted at the beginning of the pandemic in terms of opening cooling centers because the plan for cooling centers was to use libraries and community centers that were closed at the beginning of the pandemic, but have since corrected that and adjusted. We have, through the SCC alert system, a specific text opportunity where people can sign up to receive text messages when we're opening cooling centers or warming centers. People can text a message to 888-777, and they can text bad weather, and I will add this to a slide and show it in a minute. And then anytime we're opening cooling centers or warming centers, they would get a text message that notifies them of that. And then with regard to the homeless census, the street count, the methodology is to send volunteers to every census tract throughout the county and do a drive on the streets. And then we also use outreach teams to do counts in the encampments. We count individuals that we see, and then we also count the number of vehicles and the number of tents. And where we can't obviously see, for example, the number of people sleeping in a vehicle or the number of people sleeping in a tent, we use a multiplier to account for the fact that there may be more than one person sleeping in that situation. And so we do try to factor in that we can't necessarily see everyone.
I think the on the census front too, what might be of value is to have a conversation with Nick Kawada's team, and just to get a quick write-up of the work that's been being done relative to the census, because I think it's an important point, and one that I think would be, I mean, there's a lot of layers to the census, so I think this is one important one that they can give just a quick write-up on. And Scott, I'm going to ask you to give a quick call to Nick to get that. And then the last point I just wanted to lift up was the point that was raised about the communitarian zones. And Jerome, if I could just make sure I understand this, this would not necessarily be housing, but this would be a place where people could like a get a shower, get some food. Is that what you mean? Or is
Right,
it?
right. I mean, just basic services like, trash pickup, porta potties, hand washing stations, and then maybe some type of utility setup. So if there is some type of, heat wave or smoke danger alert, some type of emergency tents could be set up, that would filter air, or like emergency tents could be set up to cool people off. You have to have people travel to different locations to get, respite from heat, when maybe some of those locations could be taken to the people that need them the most.
Thank you. All right. So I'm now going to go to Antonina, then to Lisa, and then to Lucas, and then to Kelsey.
Thank you. One of the things I would like to point out is that for the community, the house community, the residents and your constituents, one thing that would be helpful is a telephone number, website, someplace that people can report that they see a person having an issue, and they see something. Now, instead of calling the police, they see an unhoused person in a cul-de-sac or or at the park or whatever. They see them often, and the community is worried about that, or a person in the community is worried about that they have some contact information, and it would be great to have somebody respond within 24 hours.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, thank you. I speak from lived experience as far as the safe parking programs go. I think that the safe parkings really need to add a lot more services. I know some of them do. The one that I'm familiar with does not have a lot of services. I think that they need to not have a 90-day limit, because I believe we all know that if you could solve homelessness in 90 days, we wouldn't be sitting here on a Saturday. And I think that they need to be looked at. I think it's a great idea for people, because I find that most of the people that I've been associated with in the safe parking are over 55, not yet 65. They don't want to go to the encampments because we all have some sort of physical disabilities and are limited incomes with Social Security or disability. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and having somewhat of an income, we don't qualify for a lot of things. And I think that the safe parking really needs to add much, much more extensive casework. I think they need to eliminate the 90-day period. And, it just needs a lot more work as far as the safe parking. I'm glad to see that there are some that are adding those things, but most of the people that fall into the safe parking are people that don't want to go to the encampments. They don't want to be alone. They want to be safe. And they need to have that feeling 24/7, not just from prior to COVID. It was only 7 in the evening till 7 in the morning, and then you were on your own for the day. So I think they need a lot more services, and especially shower services would be nice to have to go to these safe parking programs. But I just wanted to add that from personal experience with the safe parking program, if we can, try to add these services.
Thank you, Lisa. Lucas?
Thank you, Chair. I guess just a brief comment. I'm pleased to see that Mountain View is very well represented in the examples provided in the presentation. And I think, from that, what I would like to share with my peers in other cities is this is not an insurmountable problem. Within this year, really, we've increased our homeless serving infrastructure to the point where by the end of the year, we'll be able to provide shelter or interim housing for a little over a third of the counted population based on the point in time count that was done last year. This is something that we can do regionally. It's not something that Mountain View is uniquely well equipped to do. And I think it's in our best interest to do it because right now, while there isn't a mandate for us to make available emergency shelter or interim housing, we may very well find at the state level over the next year or two that there may be a mandate imposed if we aren't able to meaningfully address this challenge. And I think just, based on what we've seen with housing legislation over the past few years, that's a probability we will need to be prepared for. So I'm really happy that we're able to gather, in the context of this task force and share best practices and hopefully conclude with some ideas that we can take back to our respective councils and get implemented quickly. But if we don't do that, then we may not have the opportunities that we'll have right now while there isn't a mandate to implement solutions that are maybe more acceptable to the communities that we serve. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I do think that if we don't step up and address this challenge, it's because we choose not to, and not because we are ill-equipped to do so. I think we will have to make some hard decisions, but that's our job. But beyond that, I appreciate the presentation. It's interesting to hear what other cities are doing, and I look forward to seeing what comes from the work that this body is taking on. Thank you.
Council member, when you said you're going to be by the end of the year, you'll be able to house a third of the unhoused. What's that number?
So we have the point in time count identified 606 unhoused individuals in Mountain View. We have roughly a little over 70 safe parking spaces that right now house a little over, I think, 120 people. I had hopes to see Kimberly Thomas on here, but I don't. I think she'd have these numbers, in the back of her, available to her at the back of her hand. But so roughly 120 folks served from safe parking. If we're able to implement the Project Home Key opportunity, that'll be another 100 plus modular homes serving probably around 120 people. And then we have the Hope's Corner emergency shelter, which serves, I think, around 30 folks right now. So, well over 200 people served with the total infrastructure made available, and 606 counted, I think is pretty good, pretty successful for work done, again, primarily this year.
Thank you very much. Helpful. Kelsey?
Thank you. So I appreciate Lucas's comments in terms of this being a solvable problem and it being more of a political challenge or like a political will issue. But I would caution about using the point in time count as your goal, just because we recognize that the point in time count is consistently an undercount. You're not capturing a lot of people who are experiencing homeless and may be sheltered, like couch surfing on that given evening, because you're literally counting people. So I don't think elected should think about it as like the census of what your need is in your community. The other factor to consider is that we're likely to see an increased need because of the evictions that we're going to be seeing, and like fire, so climate refugees. So I think we need to think bigger than what the point in time count numbers are, if we're going to actually be able to fully meet the need. My other thoughts are specific to Palo Alto. So there's no Palo Alto council member on these in this task force, as far as I know. But Palo Alto, in addition to identifying a public site for safe parking, which I believe will house 12 or provide safe parking for 12 RVs, up to 12 RVs, they also did an ordinance where they allowed churches or the faith communities to use their parking lots for safe parking. But I have a lot of criticisms of that program. So it only allows for up to 4 cars. So no RVs, only up to 4 cars. And I believe they said things like it has to be a registered vehicle, which seems problematic in terms of who you're going to be able to help if they're already struggling financially and their vehicle isn't currently registered. It just seems like you're not going to serve the community who needs it with those kinds of restrictions. I also agree with, I think it was member Reeve who commented about the restrictions really diminishing quality of life. So it was part of the ordinance that people would have to leave during the day, and it just doesn't provide stability for people. That's not a good way to live your life if you have to leave every day during the day. And let's see, I think that was all I had to say about safe parking. But I also want to elevate one of the comments from our last meeting from the community. So Robert Aguirre made a comment about like a homeless court, which I thought was a really interesting idea. If we think about people, getting things like fines can really diminish your quality of life. I spoke with a man in Mountain View who had been living in an RV, but he got so many tickets that he he just got rid of his RV because he kept getting so many tickets, and then he moved into a car. So if we think about what that did to that man's quality of life, having all those fines, was it just took him from an RV, which is not ideal, but that's fine, to a car, which is a much more uncomfortable living environment. So I do think that's a good thing to think about if our goal is to increase people's quality of life.
Thank you. Maya?
Thank you. I had some comments on the slide that was up earlier on strategy number 1. A couple of things. One is I do think some of the points that were raised around safe parking are important. I mean, I'll just be upfront. One of the reasons San Jose transitioned to motels is because for us, right, just for us, I realize it's different in every city, but for us, it wasn't working. And having folks in a motel was just as much money, really, because we were paying $250,000 to operate a safe parking site at a library, and it just wasn't working. And so one of the things that we learned was using public buildings was not the best because it was just a conflict of uses. It's a business that a lot of private providers did a better job, frankly, and were able to build closer relationships with folks. And so I bring that up because I think it's, a topic that's not going away, that we need to have an open and honest discussion about our experiences with it, what we can do better, and particularly in some of the sites where it's created a conflict of uses, right? It's my belief that it is safe parking is done better by a lot of private organizations. They do a better job than we did, but motels are a really important resource for folks for some of the reasons that were just listed. One of the other things I wanted to address was in San Jose, we have been putting out hand washing stations, showers, extra dumpsters and things like that during COVID. And it's forced us as a city to look at developing a systemized approach, because frankly, these are folks that aren't eligible for like garbage systems, right? Or recycling services that house folks have, right? That we pay for and we have, and we have those basic services that come and pick up our garbage and our recycling, and it's paid for, and we know that how that works. And we as a city haven't developed something like that for unhoused folks. And so right now during COVID, we're trying to figure out, we're using COVID funds to do some of those things right now, but we're really trying to figure out a post-COVID solution to have a system for that, because I think it's really important. And I don't know, I'm very interested in what other cities are doing on this so that we can share information on how to do that. And lastly, I wanted to, well, two things is there's the section 1E, which is provide more public services in neighborhoods hosting emergency shelter or temporary housing programs. I think that's really important. I represent a district that has 29% of the county's shelter beds, that has the county's largest permanent supportive housing development, some other developments. I think from experience, I think one of the most important things that facilities can offer is on-site medical care for residents. That way people aren't depending on 911 to get medical assistance. So that I think is a huge help. And lastly, I think we need to really have a meeting. I don't know what the future agendas are, but really talking about sanctioned encampments. What are they realistic? Are they not? What are the limitations? I have done some research on the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, where there's a lot of research about that. I think we're really struggling as a city and as a county on balancing the needs for permanent housing and temporary shelter, right? And so I hope that we have some time in one of our meetings to really dig into sanctioned encampments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Hillary responded to that early on, but I think you're right. We're going to have to revisit that. And thanks for that. And the other thing that you mentioned, that council member, that I would be very interested in us making sure that we take a deeper dive in is one of the first slides that Hillary, that you showed us, that had the cost of service. It was hard to understand the cost for service over 20 years, given the number of people that are being served, and meaning like it showed a service at 1.2 million over the lifetime of the, I think it's of the unit, but I don't think it demonstrated exactly how many people were being served. And just something that Councilmember Esparza raised made me think that as we're doing an analysis of effective investments of resources, that's actually a number that we're going to have to refine enough that we understand that we can look at total numbers of people that would also be served. Thanks for the reminder. And then Rod.
Thank you, Cindy. You know, I'm one of those who is unschooled in this, basically. So yeah, I'm one of them drinking from the fire hose. And I would say for me, adding to all the data that we are having to digest is it's augmented by stories I've heard from the unhoused and those at risk of being unhoused while volunteering at Hope's Corner in Mountain View. And I have to say, I raised my hand listening to Lucas Ramirez. I'm very inspired by his words. This is a challenge that we can tackle. I realize it'll take courage. In my view, we all need to step up and figure out how we're going to do our part. And that means that cities like mine, I think, should be coming up with some specific solutions. But exactly what that means for my city and your city is what I'm eager to explore through this task force. So I haven't had a chance to speak yet, mostly because I'm still thinking, processing, and actively listening. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm going to go to Nancy.
Yeah, thank you. These questions are very daunting, and I admit to some reflection and, maybe not an upbeat feeling after our last meeting. So I am appreciative of a somewhat more optimistic tone today. I wanted to say that in Sunnyvale has a sort of brief thing about what we're doing, but I will just state that our city partners with Sunnyvale Community Services and Downtown Streets teams and others, and we are using vouchers for hotels. So the person I mentioned at the last meeting who came with an open wound and extreme mental distress, we did put him up in a motel room. So he is getting the care. We did manage to get his medicines and things that he needed. But I just want to speak to the structure and kind of the bigger picture here. Sunnyvale Community Services was designed and built around the idea of emergency assistance, where somebody maybe lost their job and couldn't pay rent. And what we are seeing now is a much bigger and less short-term problem. And that is that families, seniors are being pushed out of their homes because of COVID, because of rising wealth and income inequality. And I just wonder, to what extent can we call this an emergency? We have a COVID emergency, and then there was mention about refugees, climate refugees. I imagine some people will come here because there are services here. And is there any thought to some sort of a new status for climate refugees, and to the extent that COVID is part of the climate? This is somewhat a new issue. And I'll just say that the service providers in Sunnyvale are very interested in increased laundry services, hand washing, and transportation services. So I don't want to. I want it to be clear that as we're considering these options in the encampments question, there's not necessarily ways for people to get to where the shelter part is versus the medical services part versus the food services part without some sort of thought to transportation as well. And I'll just say that in our city, we have been looking at basically the emergency services part, like what normally would be what Sunnyvale Community Services does, versus maybe the long-term supportive housing things that we have several of in Sunnyvale. So it just seems like something new, and we don't have necessarily the structures or the thought process to really think that this is an emergency and it's going to be ongoing for a while. and react accordingly. I'll just conclude by saying that specific recommendations are one of the things that our service providers raised, is that when we get funding from the county, the people participating in the county programs may get offered places in other parts of the county because it's randomized once you get into that database. And we've had people turn down housing options in other areas of the county because they were not close to their familiar places, like their doctors and their friends. And so it was relayed to me about an older woman who died in her car because she wouldn't take the housing offered to her. So it's just like unprecedented in terms of what we're looking at. So the longer term solutions like the supportive housing stuff is the 3 to 5 years things. I don't think we can wait that long. And then our local service agencies are maybe need to be retooled or rethought about this scale of problem. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. We're just going to take all that in for now. And I will say that Supervisor Cortese worked to bring to ask our public health department if we could declare homelessness an emergency a few years ago, and we were not able to do that. And so I think the point you raise about the climate emergency is one that gives us an opportunity to think a little bit more about it. So thanks for that. And on the other issues that you raised, we'll just take all that in and take a look at how we can address that. I'm going to go to Brian, Anthony, and then to Liz, and then to Karina. And Liz, I apologize. I think I took down your hand on accident because I'm trying to keep up with whose hands are up. So I apologize for that. Brian?
Yeah. So I think this is kind of a culmination of a lot of thoughts that have been there. I raised my hand a little while ago. So I guess it surrounds the timeline, say that 3, 5, 7 years before so many people are housed into a proper location with the services that's needed. I really like the idea of the sanctioned encampments, the homeless court, just from the perspective, there's always going to be, or at least for the very long time, a percent of the population that is unhoused, and they're going to need some kind of support in their own infrastructure, the services. And I'll point to over this during COVID, is San Jose has stopped sweeping these encampments, and that has done a lot of good in regards to meeting with the people, getting them water, food, the hygiene, rather than trying to follow them wherever they end up because they're swept away. So I feel it's really, really important to have some kind of policy, or go back to the land use, where these hopefully temporary unhoused people, whether it's 6, 12, 18 months, there's a place to put them and services can be met for them. Because I really think even if in a perfect world everyone's housed, you're still going to have this percentage of the population that needs that support. What are we going to do with them? Let's find a place for them on an ongoing basis. So that I really hope we address that sanctioned encampments, because I really think that's a viable solution. It's just coming up with policy for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Anthony?
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Councilmember Esparza and maybe to the other elected officials here who were trying to wrap their head around how to garbage pickup and stuff. And for years, you guys have already had it. It's your parks and rec system, airports and roads, and the other clean system. Back when I first became homeless, it was nothing to get garbage bags and to get a pickup from a park and rec worker who was already working in that area that I camped at. But as time went on, a lot of them became resistant because they were feeling heat from their administrators and from their managers who were saying, if you pick up this garbage, then you're thereby promoting homelessness. And so like they became more resistant with giving out the bags and giving out, but they all recognized that if they gave the people the bags, it gave them some skin in the game, and allow them to actually keep their places up. And I still, and like we look at Spring Street now and how the pickup is going, and it's great. And they're actually, and one of the things that's unfortunate is that General Assistance and Social Services Agency still isn't trying to find a way, hasn't found a way to make the workfare project come into play, because it would be great. I modestly figure that each encampment has at least 30 to 55% of its population is on general assistance. And right now, the county is kind of like, digging a hole by paying it out without getting the return of the work there. But if they were able to find a way to arrange this at the encampments, at the spots where they're at, have a couple of hours a week for them to do, with the garbage to assist with the pickup and stuff like that, and then the KP in their own area, it gives them a little bit of skin in the game of where they live. Hey, we don't want to be living in our own mire. And then also it kind of gives the county, the return on its investment that it usually gets from general assistance with the workfare project.
Thank you. Thanks, Anthony. Anything else? Anthony? No. Liz Lawler?
Thanks, Supervisor. So just big picture for me on this, in order to accomplish our goal that we've been tasked with here in this task force, there's two things that need to happen, right? There's the shift in public perception on homelessness, and there's a shift in the homeless perception of county government, et cetera. And so I'm thinking we need a PR program. What can we do now to instigate a PR program to get the message out? Because then we can have communities get on board. We can get unhoused. We can hopefully rebuild trust with the unhoused. Those are two key things that will, if we can address those, then everything else will fall in place. You see what I'm saying? So I'm wondering if there's a campaign that we can get started right away. Thanks.
Thank you. And then I'm going to go to Karina.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. I definitely echo the last sentiments that were stated, so I'm not going to repeat those. But definitely, I just wanted to share, I know that in the city of Milpitas, we actually have a community group that's called now Hope for our Unhoused. And they've been very active. And so I think it's communities like that that remind me that I need to just share. I know Milpitas is not on the list, and currently we want to figure out a way of providing showers for our unhoused. So whatever we could do to make that happen, because it is, especially now regarding the health issues that are happening. We know that our unhoused are going through to our local 7-Elevens, our local supermarkets. And so we definitely want to minimize the cross-contamination that is happening, community contamination that's happening, especially around COVID. The other thing that I think needs to happen is just, again, it's just how are we keeping track of the unhoused encampments? I know that as an elected official, I've received 3 different lists. I have one from our police department. I have another one from our Parks and Recs department. There's another one I've heard from the school district, but I'm wondering if the county could maybe bring those together and what we could do to help, because I would love to know what the county may have, just to start that trust with our unhoused community, because I do believe the trust is broken. And so whatever I could do to help support that, I think that's something that maybe each city could benefit from one as well.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, I'm sorry. I had another inquiry. I'm looking here on the pages where it breaks it down by jurisdiction of sheltered and unsheltered between 2017 and 2019. I believe it was the first agenda that came out. And I'm seeing where Milpitas, their total change from 2017 to 2019 went up by 89%. And also the city of Sunnyvale, I'm not picking on you guys. I'm just stating the data that I'm reading. The city of Sunnyvale went up 147% as their total of shelter and unsheltered between 2017 and 2019. But I also see that Morgan Hill went down significantly. They're minus 71%. That one I didn't understand. I'm not real good on this graphic stuff. I'm wondering if maybe representatives from those cities could say maybe what they felt went wrong and maybe what Morgan Hill felt went right to have such a reduction.
Thanks, Lisa. What I would like to do, if it's okay, if I could ask staff to talk a little bit about the counts, because I think the point that Kelsey made is a really good one that I'm not sure how accurate they are. And I would also, just to be blunt, I think we get better at I think we're starting to get better at counting too. And in some ways we did different things. If my recollection is correct, in 2019 to try to count, for example, the undercounted, which we knew were kids and families. Could I ask, I'm not sure who would know the most about that, if that would be Hillary or Consuelo or Catherine.
I can start, and then Consuelo and Catherine can jump in. So with regard to Morgan Hill specifically, I think that one of the things that happened in the count was one of the things we do for the count is to work with the school district to provide information about people who are literally homeless. And in order to do that, they have to pull that information out from their total homeless count, where they have a slightly different definition. They can include people who are doubled up or couch surfing, where the homeless census, according to the federal regulations, cannot do that. And so I believe that in Morgan Hill in 2017, we got data from the school district. In 2019, we didn't. And I think that that's one of the things that happened there. And then in Sunnyvale, there was a period where the Sunnyvale cold weather shelter used to happen at the National Guard Armory, but that site was redeveloped into affordable and supportive housing. And so I think that that was the time period where for one season there wasn't a cold weather shelter. And so then the cold weather shelter came back online, or the Sunnyvale shelter came online, and that resulted in that different count. I don't recall why we thought there was such a big difference in Milpitas, but I'm happy to review the report again and see if I can figure that out and let you know at the next meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you. I was just wondering
and then,
maybe hear from them on what the discrepancies were.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
So we got a lot of feedback and a lot of input. I really appreciate it. For our next meeting, we're gonna dive in a little more to finances, and so I think this background was helpful in terms of just kind of laying the groundwork for that. We don't need to take an action on today's report because it was a receive report and it was really another opportunity for us to learn and give feedback. So with that, I'm going to go to our last item on our agenda, which is public comment. And then just as a reminder, we're going to adjourn until September 30th at 5:30, where we'll meet again via Zoom. I am going to ask staff to work with my office to make sure that we're following up on all of the requests that have been made and information, because we might want to reshape the next meeting just to make sure we can bring some of that information in. So with that, I'm going to go to our public speakers, and each speaker will get 2 minutes to speak, and then we'll just do one more closing comment, and we'll talk about our next meeting.
Scott Largent, you are our first speaker. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Largent. The trust is just not there. And I have brought this up for a long time. The stuff that has been done to the homeless is just disgusting in Santa Clara County. 5 years ago, in preparation for Super Bowl 50, we basically gassed all these people. We shoved them around. We sent them into industrial areas. We took all their motorhomes and cars, and we just started putting them through the punishing state. Nobody really wants to talk about that. This is the connection I have with the homeless community. It's the first time that you lose everything you own. Now, once it keeps repeating, it's not as hard to deal with, but it's that first time. My first time of being swept and losing everything was my life's work, my family history, every photograph, my father's ashes, my dog's ashes. The first picture of when I went fishing with my father, the pain is never going to go away. Okay. And then to add insult to injury, you guys made me jump through hoops to be in my kid's life. Now I'm speaking for a lot of people here because this is why I get along with them so well. Okay. This is why I have that connection. It's why that Robert has the connection with the homeless community. You guys are not paying attention to that. And I am hearing the same things over again. We talked about the same crap in this meeting that we've been talking about for 5 years. I'm sick of digging holes in the wrong direction. Our reentry network, and you know this too, Chavez, that thing dug a trench in the wrong direction chasing after alcoholism when they're all on meth right now and they need meth detox. I don't want more committees digging holes in the wrong direction. This is the same conversations over and over again, and that's why it's so frustrating. I am tired of watching the people that I care for die on our streets. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Robert Aguirre. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Okay. Robert Aguirre. Somebody on there was talking about the housed people, calling them constituents. I'd like to remind everyone on this panel that everyone that lives in this county is a constituent, regardless of how they are housed or unhoused. Also, I want to talk about the state park programs that were run by the city. One of the reasons they didn't work is because the city starts in putting in all their different requirements, and you have to have some security guy there 24 hours, and it's just how the whole thing is run is just set up for failure. I have run 3 separate safe park programs, including one for 3 years at Bellarmine, and we've had not one single incident there involving any of the people that were staying there. Any problems we had were from people that were from outside of the area. So yes, we need more safe park programs. We need them run differently than how the city of San Jose has done them. On the topic of sanctioned encampments, I took Dave Cortese and his wife Patty up to Portland, Oregon to spend the night in a sanctioned encampment. They had nothing but glowing reports from what their experience was like. We also went and checked out a tiny home village, as a matter of fact, the oldest and still running tiny home village in the United States. And they came back with all these recommendations, and nothing has happened from that. I think we need to rethink that whole thing and try to understand how these encampments can actually be run and not run from the top down, but have more of like how a HOA is run, where people are elected and they make rules. You have some basic city rules that can't be broken, but how the people conduct themselves should be up to the people living there. And then I also want to talk about the reduction in counts, either expansion or reduction of counts of the unhoused people. A lot of this has to do with the attitude that the cities have of like how they run people out of their city. And the counts are unfair because there's a shift in population, and they should stop doing sweeps before the count. Thank you.
Our next speaker is B. Beekman. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute and you will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, thank you. I came in a little late to the meeting today. Thank you for this meeting, and thank you for your efforts that you'll be working on with the task force. You know, the words of the previous two speakers mean a lot to myself. I'm not as experienced with these issues, but so it's always nice to hear, you know, public comment from Scott and Robert. And they always have something interesting to offer. And for myself, you know, you're getting a feel for yourselves at this time. I mean, to kind of, you know, mention what Scott was saying, you're getting a feel for yourselves at this time. You know, look into what is actually happening within the communities, get the real feeling that's already happening. You mentioned you need to do PR work when, you know, there's a certain set of, you know, conditions that are happening within San Jose, for instance, where I'm from, that are of interest, that, you know, that there may actually be some interesting connections growing between local government and the homeless, houseless community themselves. That's interesting. And so, you know, as a PR, you know, they've already accomplished some beginning goals. And what are the now next steps? And I don't know how accurate that information can be for you, but it's my personal feeling that's what's going on in San Jose at this time. And I guess with 25 seconds, I don't know, there's this work of the HUD recently in San Jose. I don't know how to talk about that. Apparently it's been interesting work, and it's a lot to balance how to talk about when new interesting work arrives. I invite you to look into it and slowly proceed on what could be good examples for ourselves with the homeless community in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you very much to everybody who made public comment. And just as a reminder, we're going to be talking about resources at the next meeting. We'll put together a list of report backs, and I know we have some that are more quick than others, and so we'll work with staff on those. And I will see you all Wednesday at 5:30. And thank you very much, and thank you for joining me on a Saturday. Be safe, everyone. Wear your masks, wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good one, Cindy.
Bye.
Have a good weekend, everybody.